Happy Homebrew Wednesday, folks. Ryan Patrick Murphy here. And today, we'll be making a yeast starter. Here's a few things that you will need. An Erlenmeyer flask, which these are fairly cheap, about 12-15 bucks. This is a 1 liter one. You can get a 2 liter one. Some DME, whatever you have lying around. I went and bought some extra light. You can use whatever, really. You're not making enough work to where it should really change the taste of your beer. Some aluminum foil. You're going to use this as a lid for that. I'll talk more about that later. And of course some yeast. Now, it's kind of unnecessary with white yeast because it's already has an activator, you know, and you let it inflate, whatever. But there might be times when you're making really big beer with this stuff, and it'd be good to have a starter. So I'm just using it as an example. You may need a pot. I'll get more about that later. A stir plate is nice to have. This will spin around and keep things stirred up in the flask. But if you don't have one, I'll touch on that too. So let's get started. So, yeast starters. Why would you want to make a yeast starter? Well, there's a couple reasons. One, if you're making a high gravity beer, you may not have enough yeast particles in your liquid yeast that you just bought, so you want to grow some more. And that way your yeast isn't stressed trying to tackle all that extra sugar. I'm sorry for the freezer if you hear that, or the keezer I should say, keeping the beer cold. Another reason you might do it is you just want to have a healthier yeast. I've bought Y yeast before, and I think they have like a 6-month expiration from the manufacturer. Let's see. It's best when used within 6 months. That doesn't mean you can't use it, but it's probably a good idea to do the starter so you make sure you get all the nice yeast happy and going and reproducing a little bit. The whole starter process takes about 24 hours before you should use it. You know, give or take a few hours, probably okay. Normally you wouldn't do this with dry yeast, but you can. Maybe you found that you had some dry yeast and it's expired and you don't want to run to the store or whatever. No, it could be a blizzard outside and you want to brew tomorrow or the next day. Well, if you're not sure about the state of that yeast, make a yeast starter and you'll find out pretty quick whether it's good or not. Because you will actually see the yeast. There'll be yeast on the bottom when you let it rest. That'll give, you know, when you start seeing a lot more yeast than what you put in there, that'll give you a good indication that it's probably okay to use. So we're going to get started. As part of this process of making a yeast starter, we're essentially making a mini wort. Very small amount, about just under 2 cups, at least for this demonstration. Some people make bigger batches of yeast starters. You know, they got 1 liter and 2 liter flasks. You know, if you're making a large batch of beer, you'll probably go with a 2 liter size of flask, and so you can make a lot more yeast. We're only going to make about 2 cups of wort today. If you have a gas stove, you can do this in the flask. Perfectly alright. If you're on electric, you'll want to get a pot. Get a small pot and do it in there. That's what I'm going to do. I have electric here, so I'm going to do it in the pot. So let's get started. For this starter, I'm going to use a ratio of 2 cups of water, which I've now spilt some all over the place, and ½ cup of DME. Also made a mess there, so I'm going to top that off a little bit more water. I did spill a little bit there. And I'm going to move this out of the way. I want to turn this on. So I'm going to use a whisk because it'll break up these chunks a little bit. DME is kind of a pain to work with because it likes to clump up when it gets wet. That should get all those clumps up. Now, we do need to sanitize things. Now, you're going to want to boil that for, oh, hold on. Okay. I like to keep a bucket of star sand readily available, and so I'm gonna just dunk this guy in. Just let it sit in there. It'll be fine. You can spray it. Some people have a spray. I use a spray bottle too. So that you can spray things down with that. Also, I'm going to use a funnel just so I don't spill it all over the place because I'm clumsy. So we'll put that in there. Now we're going to want to boil this for 10 minutes. To be careful not to let it boil over. Remember, this is a wort. We're making a wort here. So hot breaks are going to be a problem. So now I'm just going to keep doing this and turn down the temp a little bit. So we want to make sure we boil this for 10 minutes. Now the hot break is done. Alright, now that it's boiled for 10 minutes, let's move it into our flask. I decided to use a funnel, which I sanitized. So I'm going to just pour this in here. And hopefully not make a mess. Alright, this is pretty cool to the touch. Now, it's probably in the 70-degree range. So let's pitch the yeast into here. Okay. Don't forget to sanitize everything. Make sure things are sprayed down. Sanitation is still important. Maybe you want to spray this down a little bit. Make sure that's all sanitized. Alright. This did not tear that well, but it's alright, we still work with it. Alright, yeast is pitched. I'll take this over to the final resting spot, or the near final resting spot. Now, Remember the foil? Well, we need to sanitize this too. Okay. And then put that over the top. Now, as you can see, I'm going to use a stir plate. If you don't have a stir plate, put this somewhere where you're going to walk by it a lot, okay? We got a lot of traffic, and every once in a while, just come over and do one of these. A quick swirl, okay? That's going to be fine, but make sure you do it frequently. Now, I need to dry off this. It's not waterproof, jeez. And I forgot to put the stir plate in, or the stir bar. It's kind of an important piece for the stir plate, but if you don't have a stir plate, you don't have to worry about that. So I'm going to sanitize my stir bar. And I'm going to take this back off since I forgot about it. I gotta make sure we don't just slam it in the bottom. It might break the. Well, move it around a little bit. Just make sure you get the stir bar on the plate. And I'll move this up so you can see it. Okay. Put this back on. You don't need a ton of foil on here. Now, you might be asking, why don't you use a bung and put a cardboard or an airlock on there? Well, this way, do it this way lets oxygen still come in. It keeps bugs from getting out or coming in. So we let the oxygen in and the CO2 out. If you use a carboy or a airlock, so I don't know why I keep saying carboy. If you use an airlock, you are letting the CO2 out, but you're not letting more oxygen in, and you want to keep this oxygenated. That makes the yeast healthy, makes them happy. Now if we look here, let's see if we can get this. Well, all the yeast, none of the yeast is settled out. None of the yeast is settled out yet, so it's all still mixed in there. But now we're going to slowly dial this up until we get a vortex. Make sure we get this centered. You can see it starting to spin. There we go. And then tomorrow when I brew, we'll see how much more yeast we created. You can see it foaming up. We can't even create a vortex anymore.